And one of my favorite tricks is using the HDR toning in Photoshop. And I use it perhaps not in the way you would think. You know, it's really designed to kind of give you a kind of fake HDR look on a single shot image. And actually, one of the people who heavily influenced HDR toning being put in Photoshop was Scott Kelby himself. But I use it a little bit differently. Now I'm just going to show you what I do. Now here I have a shot, and this was actually a model I shot at Joel Grimes' workshop out in Pasadena, California a couple years ago. And it's pretty good, nicely composed. It's just, it looks a little flat, you know, and we're always wanting to kind of get that grungy look to it that brings out that detail and such. And I've discovered that HDR toning does just that really well.
Especially for a guy, it kind of gives it that masculine, rough edge.
Absolutely,
to it, right?
absolutely. So, unfortunately, not really unfortunately, but the caveat to HDR toning is that it only works on a flattened image. You cannot do it to a layered file. So this is obviously not a layered document, but let's just assume it was, or if I didn't really want to, I actually want to kind of run this effect on the original image. So go and make a duplicate of the document. So now we got an extra file. And I'm just going to go under the image menu to adjustments and choose HDR toning. Now the first thing I do is I go down here to the very bottom, we're in the advanced section, and bring the saturation to -100. I don't want any color in the image. Then I go up here to the tone and detail and push up the detail quite a bit. And already you can see that detail's really punching out. Detail in the shirt, in the background, it looks really good. When you do this, it tends to affect the exposure a little bit. So I'm just going to drop that exposure just a hair. And then go up here to the edge glow and choose smooth edges. And then just tweak the radius and strength sliders. Now, how much and where you position these sliders, it really determines on the image and how much of the effect you wanted to apply. Obviously, the higher I go with these sliders, the more blown out it gets much more darker. Now, if I was going for that, that'd be great. But rarely do I ever move the strength slider ahead of the radius slider. Usually kind of keep them, you know, one behind the other, usually on this end of the document, or this end of the slider. Now, if I turn that effect on and off, look at the tremendous amount of detail we've got in there. Now, still some areas a little bit blown out, so I'm just going to nudge that gamma up just a little bit. Because all I really want is that nice detail. I don't really want any blown out highlights or anything, or any harsh shadows or anything like that. So with that, I'm going to click OK. And I'm just going to go ahead and bring this back over to my original document. Now, I'm going to drag and drop it. Now, when you drag and drop, it's pretty much going to land wherever your cursor lands on the destination document, let's call it that. But if you add the Shift key and drag over, it will land in a line with the original file. That is assuming, of course, they are still both the same size document. And then all you need to do is in your Layers panel, change your blend mode to soft light. Now, look at the dramatic difference this has already made on this image. I've run no curves, no levels, or anything like that on this. I've merely done an HDR toning pass and blending it with a soft light blend mode. The great thing about this, of course, is you can adjust the opacity if it seems too much. And another thing I discovered, actually later on when I started playing around with this, if you want to influence the temperature of the image, on that very HDR or toning layer, I'm just going to do a hue saturation adjustment, colorize, and I can make it warmer or cooler. And you can see it's just very, very subtle. It adds a little bit of something to it if you wanted to warm it up a little bit. But in just those few steps, especially on this, like you say, you know, when you got a rugged looking guy like that, you know, so look at the big difference there.
That's a huge difference.
Huge difference. Now, that's just, of course, affecting a portrait. And this could look great, and I could almost be done at this point. But I always tend to take this into my compositing projects as a last step. I'll go in and put all the elements together, and then make a duplicate file, flatten it, run the HDR toning, and then bring it back, and it adds that little extra something. It's almost kind of like a cinematic grunge is kind of what I call it. So it's a great technique. I use it throughout the book, and as well, it's detailed in that first chapter, so be sure to check it out. It's here, Down Dirty Tricks Volume 2, and hope you check it out. So that's all I have for you today.